Good evening, everyone. This is the October 12th meeting of the Conservation Commission. If I could ask everybody to rise, I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball.
Damn it. Feels good.
You know I gotta do the,
Time got away from me.
Roll call.
okay. Christine Kamal,
Here.
Ken Stanvic,
Here.
Dave Hebert,
Here.
Mike Gendro,
Here.
Al Stewart,
Here.
Paul Gagnon,
Here.
Karen McKay here, Kara Cubit, Scott Bowden, Lisa Lysagian absent.
Okay, so that makes her in.
Oh, right, you gotta say that out loud.
Oh, you gotta
you
tell
gotta-
me that.
Oh, sorry. Tell her that she's a voting.
One more comment.
Oh, we got Kara. Oh, okay,
Bye.
Hi there.
okay.
All right.
All right,
Because
so
of
only one
seniority.
of them, yeah, only one of them. Yep, it has to be Kara.
Yes.
So-
Karen, tonight you're a member and voting because of
Wonderful.
seniority.
Cool, thank you.
Oh, thank
And-
you.
But Christine can still participate,
Absolutely.
ask
Oh, yeah.
questions, just,
Everyone here can participate.
yeah, just whatever you want to ask, that's fine too. Okay,
All right,
Go ahead,
this
Al.
evening, thank you. Two items on the agenda. First one is old business. This is map 22, lot 8-85-1, 579 Bridge Street. Discussion of proposed multi-unit apartment building. Presentation. Joseph Maynard, Benchmark LLC.
There you go. Good.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
oh, you did big this time, huh? Well, I can see better, but, I don't know.
Mr. Maynard, your floor.
All right. So, good evening. My name's Joe Maynard. I'm with Benchmark LLC. I'm here on behalf of the project at 579 Bridge Street. As we discussed at the prior meeting, this piece of property, it's about 44 acres in size. There's an existing house on the lot. We're subdividing that house off, and it'll be retained with 14 acres. The remainder of the property, which is all Zone B5, will be developed with a 65-unit apartment building. So in our first round that we came to the board with last month, the plan incorporated our access drive being within our frontage. Our frontage through that area is kind of skewed because of a neighboring property that's pie-shaped that goes across our developable area. So that placed the driveway with a very large wetland impact. So at our site walk, we all reviewed that. It was pretty clear by the board that you wanted us to try and work with the abutter, to purchase some land to be able to shift the road so that we could avoid that very large wetland impact. So my client went and he did discuss this with the neighbor. As part of his review with them, he's purchasing about 1,000 square feet of their lot, which is a small triangle that we had talked about. And what this allows the road to do is shift in an easterly direction, and therefore it would eliminate the wetland impact altogether with the road at this location. The other side of this is that, there were some concerns from the abutter, like if we could twist the building a little bit to get it away from where their house is, move our dumpster to a different location. Those are all things that this plan incorporates and slides that over. So overall, this new plan, again, we avoid the wetland impact altogether. We do have a WCD impact on this. That WCD impact on the construction of the road would be 27,100 square feet. We're trying to minimize any of that disturbance, and that is being accomplished primarily by reducing our side slopes on the left side of the road. Those side slopes would be graded at a 2-to-1. 2-to-1 is going to mandate guardrail along the top of that side of the road. So it's kind of creating an obstacle, so to say, for people or anything to get into the WCD. Another thing is I was talking to Jen in planning about this. As we've said before, the plan for this property is we're going to extend water from Main Street across from the church. That water line would extend down Main Street to 38. It would hang a left coming out of there and come down to this piece of property. As part of that extension, there's a couple of places along there that do have WCD protection. The first area is really at Beaver Brook. Beaver Brook, I had a meeting with the Wetlands Board about this a couple weeks ago. The discussion with them was that we had always anticipated doing a directional bore under the brook so that we would have no disturbance really of the wetland itself. DES informed me that as long as I directional bore, I do not need a wetlands permit to do that work. So that first crossing where Beaver Brook is, the impact would be a temporary one to set up the pits for the directional bore machine, but that crossing or that length that it would go underground there is about 250 feet. The next area is, we're very fortunate, is not until you reach the property itself. The lot that is existing, or the home that's on this piece of property, wetland complex that's between that house and our development. There's a small section right at that driveway that goes to that house. It's about a 50 linear foot section. That'll have a small impact to the buffer for the directional boring. No, sorry, not the directional boring. 50-foot impact just for the construction of the water main to get through that first section. And then there's about a 450-foot disturbance of the WCD for that. Within that 450 feet, there's two locations where the wetland does extend into the right-of-way. DOT, again, as we discussed about their semantics about how they like their driveways designed, when we look to put in improvements such as a water line in their right-of-way, they ask for us to put it to the outside edge of their right-of-way. They don't like them being along the edge of pavement, and their theory is that if they ever had to expand the pavement, they don't want a utility under it that they're going to have a concern. So they have us put these water lines or electrical utilities within 5 feet of the outside limits of the right-of-way. So I have two locations along that'll also require a directional bore to avoid a wetland impact at those two spots. One is a 200-foot directional bore. There's a small upland section. And there's about a 150-foot directional bore, and that would get us through the wetlands and to the property. Those are all temporary disturbances, and again, the bulk of that work is being done through directional boring to minimize any of the disturbance to wetlands that are within those areas. So hopefully you like this plan a lot better. Still looking for some input. I did file with the planning board. This is a big project. There's a couple of things that are still kind of hanging. One is, as I discussed before with the original driveway location, was I need a waiver for the tangent length of the straightaway before I enter a curve. 100 feet is the requirement in the ordinance. I'm looking for a 50-foot again in this location. It allows me to be able to curve the road sooner and get it outside of the buffer as much as possible and also avoid that wetland impact.
Okay. So the idea of a directional bore is the fact that you don't have to dig?
Well, directional boring, you still need a pit at both sides. So they'll come in, they dig, water is usually about 5 feet to the top of it. So they dig a 6-foot pit. It's usually about 10 feet long. They set up a machine that sends the drill bit in, and then they bore until they open up to the next pit. So the disturbance is a temporary one to create the pit so that you can get the line in, and then the disturbance after that is just the connection, and then they restore the area where the utility pits were. But again, we're trying to avoid all wetland impacts with this. I think directional boring is the way to go, especially at Beaver Brook. I just feel that that's a high water situation type of thing, no matter what time of the year you do that work. And directional boring, there's been a lot of discussion about how this water line is going to get extended with Pennachuck, and we're still kind of working out the semantics of it, but directional boring was the key to those sections to avoid the wetland impacts.
What is the size of the line?
So the existing line now that ends at Main Street just across from the church is only an 8-inch line. So the extension would be 8-inch to the property, because that's what would be required to be able to provide water to the building, fire protection services. I'm not sure in the future any type of extension from that point, or, it's kind of hard to say if you got an 8-inch line and you want to put like a 12-inch line or a 16-inch line after that, your capacity is still limited by the main line that the water's coming from. So that 8-inch line is the governing factor no matter what for this. So
what would the pressure be on this, 90 PSI?
I don't get involved in that. I'm not a fire protection guy. I'm not a water protection guy. I'm a dirt guy. So there's different semantics to the whole thing. But my I deal with dirt. I deal with wetlands. I deal with developments. But pressure and stuff in the line, that's strictly for Pennachuck and the fire protection people. So
even with what you have in front of us tonight, you'll require a waiver for a 50-foot
yes.
straight?
Yep.
And this is kind of your last pass until it changes?
What do you mean till it changes?
Well, you're not going to change anything more with the 1,000 square feet that you bought from the neighbor?
No.
Okay.
No, we sat down, figured out what we needed from the neighbor. We wanted to disturb them the least amount possible. So we came up with this plan. It's a small 1,000 square foot area. My client's compensating them for that area. But it avoids and it pulls everything out of the wetland area, so.
Question.
Yep.
Do you have a purchase and sales agreement with the neighbor?
My client, is my understanding, has a purchase and sales agreement with the neighbor.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. I don't get involved in the legal side of things, so. But I wouldn't be here representing it unless I felt that he was doing exactly what he said he'd do, so.
Is there any way you could show us under that camera? Guys, is the camera working there on the table? In the back there?
Hang on.
Are they
Dave,
working
do you have a
again?
question?
Yeah, Mike.
It's up. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, my question is this, the 6-inch line that's there right now over by the church, you said?
I think it's an 8-inch line.
8-inch, okay. How far back does that go and where does that start from? Because I know there's been talk about changing or working to do some different size lines in the town.
Right, so that line, it's my understanding, goes down to Mammoth Road and comes in from a water system that Pennachuck has off of Mammoth Road. My understanding is it's only an 8-inch line all the way up from that area. That's my understanding, so.
Okay.
Paul?
Joe, first of all, hats off. Obviously, wetland impacts are our biggest concern, and you got rid of them, so you deserve a little pat on the
My
back
client,
for that one.
Bill's pretty good. If I tell him something, he tries to make it happen. He's
Well, we
pretty
made it pretty clear in the
conscientious.
site walk, and he obviously listened, so.
Yeah,
Now, we also had a problem with the fact that all 30 acres are used to calculate the sewer loading, and yet only 5 acres are being developed. So that leaves that back, I don't know what it is, 20 acres or something, because there's a bunch of wetlands. And we had asked you if you would commit to no further development on that.
so that's a deal breaker for my client. Again, he's a realist. He knows someday something may change, and it's a big thing for him to, especially with what he's paying for this. He's paying for water. He's paying land from the neighbors and everything. his take is he really doesn't want to put a restriction on that backside because we don't know what's going to happen in the future over in that section of the lot.
You know,
I'm
there's-
back before you if it does happen, but
There's room for compromise, you know, you can protect 100% of it, you can protect half of it, but if you protect none of it, you're squeezing 65 units on less than 5 acres, and as a result, using up 3/4 of an acre of buffer, because it won't fit in the 5 acres. And then you won't give us anything to compensate, and I already gave you credit for the wetland, you did a good job, but we've got 3/4 of an acre or 2/3 of an acre of WCD that's been impacted. And, I mean, this couldn't be any tighter a site.
well,
If you took a few units off, we talked about this, Mike actually brought it up last time. If you took a few units off that L shape, you took a few parking spaces out, you could pull that road away and get us a little less WCD impact, something to move us in a direction where we're not, I mean, you're basically using up 100% of the upland and another 2/3 of an acre of buffer in order to squeeze this thing onto this small lot. And if you did eliminate a few units and you eliminate a few parking spaces, that means the detention pond gets smaller because you don't have any as much as impervious, and that pulls you out of the buffer a little more. So, you know, if we get down to the 20,000 square foot range, maybe it's not such a big deal, but not 20. If we got down to 20% of an acre or so, maybe it's not that big a deal out of 5 acres. But gee, 5 acres with almost another acre of buffer impact is kind of hard to swallow.
well, you know, I just want to point out that because of our thoughts about the future, right? I'm trying not to shoot myself in the foot for any type of extension of this road system to the back piece of property. So we've sat with our wetland scientist. She's chosen the area that she wants us to cross that wetland if in the future it ever happens. And so we're trying to align this road in such a way that we can still meet the grades and cross that at a minimal disturbance to that wetland complex. The difficulty we all know, we walked across that wetland area, it's about a 300-foot upland to upland embankment. So when you start filling that, I need to be as low as possible for a number of reasons. One is the state's going to make me put a box culvert or numerous box culverts under a crossing of that size. But I also have to be low enough so that I can meet the road grades and be able to get drainage to flow to wherever it is. I got to create a low spot out through this area to pick up my drainage because I can't just sheet flow a 300-foot crossing off the side of a road into that wetland complex. So we've done alignments and stuff to design or potentially design a road that would extend through to the rear piece of this property in the future. I think the design that we've come up with for that road really minimizes that future crossing of that wetland complex. Shifting the road, moving the road, I'm only going to end up being higher. I'm going to have grade issues as I kind of come across this lot for that potential. And I know you'd rather not me cross the wetland at all, but, you know, I just, in my gut, I got a plan for it, so.
Well, that eats at us too, because now you take an upland that's too small for 65 units, you cram them on it, then you use up 60% of an acre of buffer. Then you, after this is all done, you cross the wetland anyway, and then you go through the upland area on the other side that you've used for the septic load here. I mean, from a conservation perspective, it just feels like a lose, lose, lose. There is nothing in this from, other than what you did to get it out of the wetland disturbance. There's nothing in this from a conservation perspective.
Well, you know, that backlanding, you say I'm using this loading and then I'm doing that on the backside. The way the state's looking at the loading, it's a cumulative thing across the property that I have. And I'm using almost 20,000 gallons per day of my 33,000 gallons per day that I have in that 30 acres of capacity. So even if the backside was to ever get developed in some fashion, it's going to be limited to whatever's left of that gallons per day. So if we use 19,900 on the front and 33,000's my cap, the back's only going to have 14,000 gallons per for septic capacity. The other side of this is that your own zoning, I can't do anything with that if the zoning, the way it sits today. It's kind of self-preservation, right? Because the ordinance said that in order to get the density that I got for this building, I'm using the whole 30 acres for that at this time.
Okay. Anybody, any further? Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up with Paul's going on this. I mean, you've looked at the land that's available, you've looked at the WCDs, you looked at the wetlands themselves. Why can't you make this thing fit within those constraints? Why do you need to have a 65-unit building of this nature with all the wetland violations, as Paul's pointed out? Why can't you just shrink the project to make it fit? Because it's not a surprise that the wetlands were there. There's not a surprise that the WCDs were there. So when you're planning of this project, rather than say, gee, we're going to be able to take advantage and of the WCDs and want to creep into them, why don't you just shrink the project and make it fit with what you have? Because it's not a surprise.
Well, again.
What am I missing?
So there's a lot to this project, and as everybody knows, this went through the court system as a 90-unit development, okay? And that was a court case. It came back. We came in for workforce housing again on this piece of property. Ultimately, I was working for a different client when I did all of that work, right? And so now I have this new client, and he's willing not to do the taboo of the workforce housing of 90 units across this piece of property. But there's a certain value that you have to be able to get out of a piece of land in order to afford to bring water down Route 38. You got to be able to afford to purchase the land. You got to be able to afford to make a profit on your property. So again, I'm not trying to decimate your WCD in any fashion. I'm trying to plan for the future. And so my road layout is in such a location that a number of things happen. I can get all my drainage from my building back to that detention pond that's at the road. When we moved the road up the way that we did, I was able to shift the parking and shave some of that down so that I could keep the entire detention pond now outside of the WCD, because that seemed like the issue when I was at my prior meeting, because there was concern that the detention pond went into the WCD. So, there's all these factors that kind of go together to make a project viable, and also from a design standpoint that I'm not shooting myself in the foot for 20 years down the road.
Are you saying that unless you get these compromises, it's not a viable project?
Yeah.
But you knew all these WCDs were here, and you know the wetlands were
I knew
here,
there was
right?
going to be a WCD impact associated with this. I knew that
You
from day
wanted to
one.
you wanted to have a WCD impact, right?
Did I want a WCD?
Well, you had to look at it and say,
Well, I did.
if I'm going to put the project in, then I'm going to have a compromise here somehow. I'm going to have to take some of that WCD and use it, right?
Well, I'm kind of stuck because of where the road comes into the property. So my whole first 300 or 400 feet of this road right off the bat is fixed because of curves and design standards that the town has.
I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud that says that you've got a project which can only be viable if you take these following compromises, and I'm saying maybe you don't have a viable project.
Maybe I do.
Because, the wetlands, WCDs, once they're gone, they're gone. And this town faces a death by 1,000 cuts, because every time somebody like yourself comes in and says, I'm just going to take a little bit, and the next guy comes in and says, I'm just going to take a little bit more. And by the time you get done, we've lost a lot of WCD, and the wetlands get impacted. So maybe this is not a viable project. I mean, that happens sometimes, right? I mean, I do design a lot. I do electrical engineering, and I try to fit into a footprint of a product. And sometimes I have to come back and say, it doesn't work.
Christine?
Yes. My concern is the proposed build on these 5 acres is so large, it's overburden on 5 acres. And when we did the sidewalk, I raised those concerns that the state in our own zoning ordinance says that wetlands cannot be included in the consideration for the septic loading. And you did say that it could, providing that it wasn't very poorly drained soils.
Correct.
Okay. So we've got 14 acres anyway of poorly drained soil. that cannot be included in that calculation. And what the state says is that it has to be contiguous land to build on.
Yep.
Even if the whole encompassing thing was 30 acres, you cannot include the very poorly drained soils. So with that said, you're left with 5 acres to build 65 units with 130 bedrooms. One of the things you clarified is that for the first 3 acres, you can have 10 bedrooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was 10,000 for each additional bedroom. Bedroom. So if there's 3 acres already taken up, you've got 10 bedrooms for those first 3 acres, and this 43,560 square feet in an acre. You've got 2 of those, so that's 87,120 square feet. And if you divided that by 10,000 square feet, you are going to be allotted an additional 8.7 bedrooms to the 10 bedrooms. Right?
No,
And
so,
so what I'm coming up with is you can only put 19 bedrooms on 5 acres. I'm just trying to be concrete and objective about this.
so I went through this at the planning board level. So the planning board, and it's very clear in the B5 zone, I can use wetlands and everything in how many bedrooms I'm allowed.
Not-
That's what it says.
No, I
don't have it
right-
with me,
I
but-
do have it right here, so
Yep.
let me read it to you. On 307, this is the Town of Pelham zoning ordinance, 307-13, additional lot size and street access requirements. Under A, lot size requirements, it says, the following shall not be counted in the computation of the required minimum 35,000, 55,000, and 217,800 contiguous square feet non-wetland area requirements. Land areas containing poorly or very poorly drained soils is defined by the site septic soils mapping stands for New Hampshire and Vermont, or such subsequent version as adopted. So you cannot count that in the computation. If you'd like me to read the state, too, under New Hampshire Code,
ENV WQ
1005.
1000.
Yep, okay. That says right there, in all cases, the lot shall contain a minimum of 20,000 contiguous square feet. And then it says what should not be included as available land when calculating the minimum lot size, even though the lot's boundaries might include these areas, are surface waters including lakes, ponds, rivers, and streams, and 2 very poorly drained soils. It says others, but right there. And you wrote it down on your map. You have it delineated as very poorly drained soils. So just to be clear, this is a huge overburden on such a small parcel of land.
All right. So under your ordinance, okay, in the chart on table 1, right, we're table of dimensional requirements. So some of the stuff that you were reading deals with single-family dwellings and two-family dwellings. When we get into multifamily dwellings, if you look at the chart, it says lot size minimum 130,680, which is 3 acres, right? And then it has a single asterisk next to it. So then you follow that asterisk down to this, and it says multifamily dwelling shall have an additional 10,000 square feet of land area for each bedroom in excess of 10. But there's no exclusions for wetlands under multifamily. There's only that.
It has to be contiguous. That's the key word. It has to be contiguous land. It cannot be, and it says it right there, that even though that might encompass, that all that acreage might encompass the whole lot, the whole 30 acres, you cannot include the very poorly drained soils in your computation, especially for septic loading.
So, there's a lot of things that are being said here, right? And there's a lot of, so under your own ordinance, and I went through this with planning board, okay? In planning board, the first thing we look at is what does the zoning allow? Okay, so when we look at the zoning, it's strictly B5. B5 allows multifamily dwelling. Under multifamily dwellings, it's 3 acres is your minimum lot size. That's strictly what it is. But then for each additional 10,000 square feet, you get 1 bedroom in excess of 10. So again, as we discussed, the first 3 acres, 10 bedrooms. It does not say anywhere in the ordinance that I have to subtract out wetlands or very poorly or poorly drained soils in the calculations for multifamily dwelling. It just doesn't. I've been through this already. I'm sure of this. It's not a matter of semantics. It's the zoning. So if there was an exclusion in here that specifically said under multifamily dwelling you have to exclude very poorly drained soils, I would agree with you 100%. The ordinance doesn't say that. So then the second side of this is that DES has their rules governing this. And when we do these calculations, they look at the block of land that I have to work with. There's always a mix of poorly, very poorly, group 1, group 2, group 3 soils on every piece of land that we do. But when you start looking at the way they do their calculations, you're right, I can't use the very poorly drained soils in my sewage loading calculations, which is you get 2,000 gallons per day per acre, and then there's a soil factor that's associated with every one of these things. And the soil factors range from a number, just a 1 for a very perfect soil, to a 3 on a poorly drained soil. All right, so those are all the calculations. So based upon that math on the state's own ordinances, and I have sat with the state subsurface on this application already. I've been told, Joe, submit the plan, we'll approve it. I have no issues from that standpoint.
Well, according to the state allows, as you said,
Yep,
2,000 gallons per acre.
yep,
You're proposing to build something, a structure that's going to require 19,500 gallons
Yep.
per day. So to figure out the acreage that you need for that, you would divide it by 2,000 per acre, right?
On
Yes.
best soils.
on a
On
best soil.
On best soils.
Yep.
And I come up that you would need 9.75 acres, and I haven't even multiplied it by the soil that you said was 1.2 for the soil, which would come out to 12.67 acres that you would need to build the proposed build that you're talking about,
And-
just on the septic loading.
And again, this is something, that's a state permit, and from my standpoint, okay, I am not concerned about submitting an application and that being approved at DES. I've already spoken to them about it. I know from your standpoint, you guys looking at, I'm cramming everything on this one little piece of land, okay? But from what's allowed under the state's rules, what's allowed in the zoning, this is what's allowed in the zoning. And if I get denied at the state, I don't have a project. That's what it kind of comes down to. And I wouldn't be here presenting that I can make this work if, like, my client's going to have me in court because I'm falsifying what I think can be done or permitted on this land.
So you're saying that the state says it's okay to build 130 bedrooms on 5 acres of land?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, you can't look at it as 5 acres. You have to look at it as 30 acres.
No, you cannot, I'm still going to maintain, you cannot include very poorly drained soils. I think where people get confused is the wetland buffer. That can be included in the calculation and specifically says that. But what it specifically says as well is that you cannot include the very poorly drained soils. And
But
I called,
I'm
spoke to
not.
3 engineers now.
And that's
I called again.
awesome
And they say
because-
the same thing. You cannot include, just saying.
And I'm just saying, like I said, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't think that I can get this permitted. And I told you before, I sat with Wetlands Board last week about this project. I sat with Subsurface 6 months ago with this project. I was back on the phone last week with Subsurface on something. I said, I got to run this by you again because I'm getting all kinds of feedback from all these boards that I can't do this. And I said, I know I can because I've been doing this 37 years. And I've done this many times over 37 years.
Can we ask a question? Can we get that opinion or statement in writing? I mean, you keep referencing, I talked to these people, but I don't see anything that you're bringing forward to the table that says, here it is in writing, guys.
Well, so the only way I can get something out of the state in writing, because I have to submit a plan. I'm not ready to submit a plan yet because I don't know if I'm going to get the waivers. I don't know if I'm going to get the things that I need to move forward with the design.
Then I guess I got to, and I'm not challenging your veracity, but I'm saying in a business sense, if it's not in writing, okay, it doesn't exist. You're telling me that you have this, people have told you this.
Yeah.
Just ask them to write it down and submit a letter to us.
So
saying-
I can do one better. I can submit the septic plans for this property in about 30 days. I can submit it to the state. Within about a week, I could have an approval on it, subject to alteration of terrain approval. I feel I could do that. I could, if I wanted to
let's-
spend that time and then,
And can you exercise that if you feel you can do it? Because I really don't want to work on, I'm hearing one statement coming from the Conservation Commission representative here. I'm hearing your statement say, oh, sure, we can do it. I'd like to see that in writing on both sides. Can we get this in writing from the people that you've got a letter that,
Oh, letter.
yeah, could I get something in writing from the people
Try to get a
you're
letter
talking
is-
to, those 3 engineers?
So I don't want to submit a plan until I talk to the planning board. I'm there next week, because if they move something or change something on me, I'm not doing this 5 times. That's kind of where I'm at on it. But
Okay. Karen, or anything else?
Well,
Kristen?
I do have a few questions.
Okay.
Okay, so you are gonna bring a water line from
church.
down the, yeah.
Street.
Down on Main Street, that's
Yeah.
Main Street. Okay, could you go through each wetland crossing or,
Well, I'm
'cause
avoiding
I'm
the.
trying to write down
Okay.
what the impacts are, and you were kind of going a little bit quickly. And,
Okay.
and you didn't give us a plan to show us.
So go to sheet 3 that I gave you.
Yeah,
Okay, and on sheet 3, I pasted it together, so there's the match line on
oh,
it.
it's up at the top.
Yeah, you know, I'd already printed the other stuff, and I said, I gotta bring this for this, so I said, I'll mark this up. And then I realized after I was writing up my stuff up tonight, but that first
Okay, so,
WCD impact along Main Street is about a 250 linear foot
okay,
impact.
so, can you,
Yep.
can you go under that camera and point to where this is? I'm just trying to
Yep.
make notes so that, when I write this up, I can, okay, the brook is that way,
Right here.
okay,
Yep, and so this segment right here, we had the wetlands flag a couple weeks ago. That's about a 250 linear foot directional bore is what we're going to be looking to do in that area. And I'm trying to start my directional bore right on the fringe of the WCD, and it'll come out on the other side of the driveway down there. So that's about a 250 linear foot
oh,
directional
it's
bore.
down here? I'm looking over here.
Well, that's one direction.
Yeah, I couldn't
This
fit
is
it all
just
on
a
one
straight
page.
line. See, right there, there,
Oh,
there.
these are the ones on Bridge Street. This
Yeah.
is the one on,
Yep.
okay, so how much is it on the Main Street one?
Main Street, it's about 250 feet.
250 feet of WCD?
Yeah, but it's all directional bore, so it would be underground. So there really wouldn't be a physical disturbance except at the very beginning of that and the very end of that, where they have to dig a pit to be able to get the machine in and send the drill bit.
Okay. And then
30 Bridge Street.
down on, and then you're gonna come down,
So then you
you're
come
gonna go
down,
to the corner of Bridge Street and Main Street, and
Yep.
then you're gonna go up Bridge Street.
yeah, then it comes across past Reed Ave, under the power lines.
I don't know what is wrong with me today, I'm not. Oh,
It comes in over here, there's Reader Ave.
yeah, okay. So there's no problem until you get to the owner.
The owner's
Current
driveway.
owner of the whole property, you have to go under the driveway.
Yeah, so, well, I don't mind, like, their driveway goes to the WCD at the very beginning there, but I have a small 50-foot section of WCD impact there to get the water main in across that
Okay.
driveway.
So you have a 50-foot disturbance there of the WCD?
Yep. And then between that, there's a small 50 or 60-foot section that's outside of WCD.
Okay,
And then I have a 450-foot section of the line that'll also be in the WCD, but it'll be, one stretch of it is 200 would be a directional bore.
okay,
There's a little upland again, and then there's a 150-foot section of directional bore. And then there's another upland section after that.
does 200 and 150
That's
equal
350.
450?
Yeah, well, 200 and 150 is 350, but there's another 100 linear feet that's uplands. They can only go so far with the directional bores, so we got to keep those distances in that 250 or under range. So what we were able to do is we broke it out into those upland areas so that they can set the drill up to be able to do the borings under the wetland.
Okay, so you're gonna go 50? Then
And
you're
I-
gonna go in that little tiny piece of upland, but that's WCD
Well,
also.
I have a little section of upland after that 50, that's where they'll end up setting up the directional boring machine.
Okay, but
and-
that's WCD.
Well, that isn't. That
Oh,
little
that's-
section between the 50 and the first 200-foot directional bore.
Okay.
That's an upland outside of a 50-foot sea.
Oh, it's
WCD.
outside the buffer?
Yeah, so we'll be digging a pit there outside the buffer. I was trying to set it up as much as possible to avoid the buffer impacts and the wetland impacts altogether.
Okay,
So when I set up on that, I have a small section of wetland. It's about 170, 180 feet. So we're going to directional bore for 200 feet.
and then you're gonna pop up on this other little
I'm going to
upland?
upland, which
But
is, that's in the,
that a WCD?
that's in the WCD.
That's in the WCD,
It's in the WCD.
okay.
Yeah, and then there, we'll go back down to another pit in directional bore for another 150 feet.
Okay, so, but that will be that's a WCD impact of about 100 feet.
Yeah, again, your ordinance, like if I want to go and dig in the WCD, I'm digging below the WCD because
Right.
we'll be down 6 feet below the grade.
Right, but I assume that you're gonna have to remove trees and vegetation and stuff. No?
Yeah, there's not a heck of a lot along that stretch.
Okay,
There may be some small stuff that has to come down. The state pretty much keeps that area clear now, almost to the edge of their right-of-way.
okay, so I guess over on Main Street, you got 250 feet of WCD impact for this drilling situation. And then over on Bridge Street is what, 450, or is it 450 plus the 50 to go under the driveway?
450 plus 50 under the driveway.
So it's 500 total.
Yep. Well, 500 there
That's-
and another 200 on Main Street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
500 total on Bridge Street, 250 total on Main Street.
Yep.
I'm just trying to get these numbers correctly. All right. Okay, and I told you the last meeting that, and I told you at the site walk, that I was a no for this project if you don't lock up that other land. I'm still a no. I mean,
I can't.
that's
That's
fine,
not
that's,
my decision.
we're not the last authority on this.
Yep.
But I publicly said that to you, and I meant it at the time, and I still feel the same way. I appreciate you getting that little extra piece of land from the neighbor and moving over the basin and moving the road a little, and, you know, I know that I had said that at the last meeting, and I believe I said at the site walk too, that I wanted the outside of the road planted, no mowing, no fertilizers, just thickly planted.
And they're working on the plan for you for that.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I also mentioned that the neighboring lot, the one that you purchased the little piece off of, the woman was there at the site walk, and we went and looked at her backyard, and I said, whatever you could do with the parking over there to create a little more space to plant things, if you can do that, I would appreciate that,
Yeah,
because she shouldn't have
we
to like
did.
come out and sit on her back porch and look at a parking lot in a building when she's been looking at woods for 25
Right.
years.
We
you know?
we did adjust that about 9 feet, so we gained another 9 feet in there. And I know my client's been talking to them about, you know, he's purchasing this sliver of land from them, but he's also been talking to them about the landscape scheme and what he can do for them for that, and he's in communication with them.
Yeah, and I appreciate all of that stuff. I still comes down to you used all this for the loading and all that stuff, you used the whole lot. Unless you say you used the whole lot and you're done with the whole lot, I'm a no. I mean, planning obviously has a say, you know, the final say, and I don't know if you have anything you gotta go to zoning for, but,
No, I don't.
and I don't know where anyone else here stands either. I don't know what other people's opinions are on this, but I can't support a plan that you're not gonna, you're using all the land and then you're saying you're not gonna lock it up, so. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I respect that.
And
All right,
with all of that, is there anyone here from the public that would like to say anything about this? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Name, address.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Nate Boutwell, 107 Bridge Street. I'm also a water commissioner in the town.
Yes.
I'd just like to remind the board of the value of bringing public water down Route 38. This town has been running into some serious problems with water supply issues. Mr. Maynard's customer is willing to spend a tremendous amount of money to add value to this town in the future. I ran into a situation up on Mammoth Road where road salt contaminated my wells. There were several wells in that area that have high sodium chloride. I had to replace a water tank every 12 months. Now we brought Pennachuck water down, and it has been a godsend. I don't have to worry about any of the problems that come with a household water system. One of the other issues that we've been working with and studying is the discharge of water softening systems into the groundwater supply. The more homes you have, we know that the water qualities that the state regulates are continually getting more and more stringent, which means greater water purification and treatment systems. With that means more discharge, more salt into the watershed. So I think this board should really take a close look at the value of municipal water that's heading up Route 38. I can't say support the project because of it, but I hope it will weigh towards maybe supporting it, just given the fact that the value added and the asset that this town will obtain in the future with public water supply on 38, and the potential to expand that water supply, having it right there, the directional drills that Mr. Maynard's talking about are an extreme amount of money. So just going back to the financial aspect of this project, that water supply is a very costly thing, and again, I feel it's a tremendous asset to this town, and I hope the board doesn't overlook that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Please give your name, address.
Lisa Corbin, 655 Bridge Street. So I am the abutter
Yes.
to this project, and Bill has reached out to me. He has been very supportive in trying to help minimize the impact on my land. That being said, I mean, he's offered to move the property back by selling that piece and giving him to lessen the impact on the wetlands. So hopefully that project can be moved back at least another 9 to 10 feet, which would double what it was. Initially, the parking lot was supposed to be 10 feet from my property, which I did not realize until just recently. As you stated, I've had 20-plus years of privacy back there, and now I have dogs. I just don't know what that's going to look like with the parking lot and, you know, the beeping of alarm systems and how they're going to react. But, I mean, it's going to definitely be a different scenario for me back there. You know, that being said, having that project pushed back would mean a lot in terms of doubling that as opposed to 10 feet to now 20 feet. So that, you know, I don't know where the project's going. There still seems to be a lot of questions, but that's definitely, you know, something that is a positive, at least in my, you know, on my side I'm looking at right now. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any further comments? Paul?
Al, I would just say that I do appreciate the fact that the water line is being brought up, and I think that was a good comment Mr. Boutwell made about that. And I'll say again, I appreciate the fact there's no wetland impacts and that they're working with the abutter to make things better. But we're obliged by RSA 36A to protect the natural resources, and to just give up 2/3 of an acre of buffer. This client has 10 acres of upland, and all we're asking for is lock up some of that buffer. Tell us that you're going to take half of it, take 5 acres of that upland, and lock it up to never be developed, to offset the fact that you used up 3/4 of an acre of WCD. This is not a big ask, but he wants his cake and eat it too. He wants to cram 65 units on a small area and impact the WCD as a result. And then he wants the ability to cross the wetland, which is going to be a huge wetland impact. And then he wants the ability to potentially use the 10 acres of upland that's left on the property. From our perspective, as people who are supposed to be protecting the natural resources, that's just too big an ask. I'm with Karen. I don't think it's that big a deal. You can still say we could put a road through it if you need to connect it to a lot in the back, which we all know someday Mr. Plouffe will probably develop, and probably get a road into Balcom, connection through from 38 to Balcom. That's probably going to happen someday. But don't use up the 10 acres in addition to the WCD impact, in addition to crossing the wetland. It's just too much for me. Thank you.
Anyone else from the board? Yes, Christine.
In just another area of concern, there are 10, for lack of a better word, septic systems,
Disposal areas.
disposal containers around, they go all around the building.
Yep.
One of the things that I don't think I heard addressed is, if those fail, in the future, where would you put the new septic systems?
So 99% of the time, we replace the septic systems in the exact same location that they were permitted. There is options to move the systems around if I had to out there, but we did enough test bits. I feel confident those locations are going to be very satisfactory for what we need to do. And again, I'm doing a pre-treatment type of design. So ultimately, the nice thing about breaking it into 10 different systems, if one system fails for whatever reason, gets grease or has some issue, they only have to replace that 1,000 square feet, instead of one massive field, which is what typically happens on something like this. So,
Thank you.
How would you, sorry.
Dave?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what is being said. I want to see the water come up 38. I want to get water in Pelham. But again, I feel that it's a give and take here, okay? And I think you're taking more than you're actually giving, and you basically said, well, if I can't have what I want, then it's a dead issue here. The whole thing with the different, Christine was, reading, the different variations here. I think that would be something that we need to take a look at. And, if we were able to get, something from you, you said you could go to the state, see if you can get that approved. But I still feel that there is give and take here.
Anyone else on the board? Okay.
Well,
Yes, Karen.
I just wanted to, Christine was talking about replacing the septic systems, and you said you'd replace it in the same location. Could you just quickly say how do you do that? If it fails, do you have to dig it up?
yeah,
or-
so typically a septic system fails within 6 inches of the sidewall or bottom of the field. It's just, septics are just a aggregate material, and they're made to fail is pretty much the whole thing. The best thing, though, with any septic system is it's all a biological oxygen demand, right? So what typically happens in a field, if people dump grease or something down the drain, it forms a scum layer around the leach field. That scum layer turns it into a bathtub is pretty much what it is, and it cannot get oxygen for the bacteria to survive and do their biological breakdown before it seeps into the area. It just becomes a big bathtub. The systems that we're putting in on this lot, they're aeration systems, so it's an oxygen-rich effluent that gets out to the field. So therefore, they last a lot longer than a conventional field in general. We do them around the lakes all the time, the clean solution. And it's just, there's another one called Soil Air I use, Wasyco. There's probably a dozen different aeration variations out there.
You don't know what you're using.
I'm using the clean solution.
And if it doesn't work, you dig it up and you have to put new aggregate material
Yeah,
in
so
and get rid of all the grease and the
Yeah, so,
materials.
in 30 years, when that system fails, or 35 years, 40 years, whatever it ends up being, a lot of my my septics are going to be under parking. So they would saw cut the pavement, excavate out, remove the contaminated soil, haul it off-site for disposal, and then they would bring in new aggregate and build the system and then pave the surface. So,
Okay, that's all, I just wanted that.
Christine?
So with that said, these septics, like the Clean Solution, I don't know about the other ones, but I know about Clean Solutions, they can fail when they do get saturated with water. And that's why I brought it up, because you're surrounded by wetlands, 14 acres anyway, and you're going to use up all this, what was once pervious surface area, is now going to be this huge, huge 4-story, 130-bedroom apartment complex with pavement all around it. Now you've pretty much taken up all that pervious surface area and made it impervious, and the only thing left on the other side of that is the wetlands. And so
Well-
if that, and plus you're taking it down 20, I think you said 20 feet? That
Yes.
goes
About
down
20
20
feet.
feet. So now we're getting lower to the ground and to the wetland. And so I'm just concerned, if that gets saturated, where will the effluent end up going, and the impact that it would have on the wetlands, as well as it's right on that, the top part of that lot is on the I want to say the largest aquifer,
It's
with
a
the highest
large
transmissivity.
yep.
The water running underneath there is
Right.
is quite
But
substantial.
when we do these projects, right, so this needs an alteration of terrain permit from the state of New Hampshire. And so, and under the alteration of terrain rules and regulations, they're very strict on the guidelines for what we have to do with the water. So under the current alteration of terrain requirements, I have to completely pretty much detain a 2-year storm event on site and infiltrate that back into the ground. So this property is all being designed so that I take all of those impervious surfaces, I'm sending all of that water to that detention pond that I have that's as close to Route 38 as possible. That pond will handle all my storm events. It'll handle all the required 10, 25. We check them for 50 to make sure they don't fail. But the pond itself will be an infiltration pond. So even though I'm paving the surfaces, right, because right now it's a very well-drained soil, so you're right, rain falls on it, I have very little runoff from the property because it just goes right into the ground. That actually hurts me, because now when I pave it, I go from a coefficient of like 45 for woods or 50 for woods to 98 for pavement, so I'm almost doubling my runoff coefficient. So that detention pond is enormous to be able to handle those storm events, and that detention pond is set up, it just infiltrates it, so water only sits in that pond for a period of 24 hours, but we have to detain that water for all these different storm events, and then there is an overflow for the larger storms that allows it to go to the wetland, but it's a big recharge system is what it is.
So I'm just talking about the effluent from the septic
So,
systems.
yes, there's a little,
Because there is a leach field that goes along with that. So water leaches out.
well, there's leach field and there's the drainage
Right,
system.
I'm just talking about what's going on underneath the pavement. Where would that effluent go if the ground gets saturated?
Right. Well, what happens is when the ground gets saturated and the field scums up, it turns into a bathtub is pretty much the best way to explain it. So nothing leaches out. And what ends up happening is it ends up either bubbling up through the pavement because it's a pressure system, it's a pump system. And so what happens is it can't bleed out to the side because the side walls become a scum layer. It just seals off, and the bottom of the field will seal off. The only other place for the fluid to go, because when we pressurize the system to send the fluid in, would be up. And you actually see it kind of bubble out of pavement when a system is in
So
failure.
you're saying that the effluent can't seep
Well, it
outside?
will, up until the point that it gets to septic systems fail over time. It's just the nature of what they are. And so the fields themselves, picture it like a pyramid, right? So the water's all, gravity's pulling it down. It kind of goes at an angle into the earth as it goes down. Sidewall-wise, it doesn't really flow a lot out sideways. It flows more in a downward scenario. Even though I'm taking that property down that hill in the center about 22 feet, the areas where the septic systems are all going are in natural soil areas. Those areas where those fields are going aren't really in a cut. If they're in a cut, it's a couple of feet. It's not a huge excavation where they're going. My test pits on this property range from, we stopped at 8 feet on one. We were down on some of the pits 14 feet, no water table type of scenario. The building and parking lot, that whole area probably sits, just counting contours, about 8-9 feet above the wetland area. So any of my septic areas and so forth, they're all plenty of separation and water table and things like that. So I'm not worried about like groundwater seepage or anything like that under the field because I'm well above any of those water tables. So.
Okay?
I just
One
got
more from Karen.
One more question. Did you consider like the other building in the town that this company has done? I think some of the parking might have been under the building. Did you
Yeah.
guys consider any of that
So-
in order to like kind of reduce?
My client bought that project already approved.
Oh, okay.
So that building is a little different of an animal than like.
Well, it
with this.
obviously is. It's much
Yeah.
smaller and fits the site perfectly.
Actually, I don't even know how many acres that is, but I don't think it's that huge of a piece of property.
But it's
You know,
only like 16 units, not 65.
Well, again, it's a 2-acre lot. It's not a big property. Pelham is blessed. The center of town here and the outskirts of this are all just beach sand. It's, well-drained soils.
But anyways, that's off the track. What, did you consider putting some of the parking under the building?
We did.
Or is that
We
not
looked at it. It just wasn't a viable option.
Okay.
It's very, it's costly. B, the fire stuff that you have to do when you put vehicles under living space, the fire code kicks in and it makes it pretty much not feasible on a project of this size.
Okay, that's my last
Ken?
question.
Yeah, just a suggestion, in the interest of time, I mean, we've been doing this since 7 o'clock, it's now 8 o'clock, we do have another item scheduled on the agenda. Have we sufficient, I think we've asked a lot of questions, you've provided a lot of insight.
No, I
and
hear you.
information.
Yep.
And I think you've got the gist of what the Conservation Commission is trying to accomplish in terms of protecting more of the wetlands and whatnot. So do you have enough information to go back and possibly consider the changes that have been suggested, or?
Yeah, the biggest thing I see is I'm not doing much more on this until I see the planning board next week, because if I don't get the waiver that I'm going to need for my road, I'm back to square one, is pretty much how this all evolves, right? I need them to, tell me they're going to be okay with a 50-foot tangent in that location. Otherwise, I'm scrapping this and I'm back before you with wetland impacts, so.
Okay, the board,
I just
Yes,
got
Dave.
one other question. With those pumps that you're using for the septic,
Yep.
what do you have for a backup, if that were to ever to fail? Like,
So typically in a pump situation, the pump station on a residential, you'd have reserve capacity in your tank. The state used to say you had to have a day and a half reserve capacity, but they kind of went away from that in the past few years. In this situation, though, what's happening is my pump station for each of these, there's 2 systems on the site. I have 8-foot vaults that are over 12 feet deep, so I probably have close to a day's reserve capacity in each one of my pump stations alone. So, my take would be that would be satisfactory. If the building doesn't have power, they're not going to have a lot of things happening in the structure, so.
have you ever used a generator system?
I have, but not on a project like this. Typically, large commercial systems or large buildings, we've done generator backups and stuff on.
Because it can get real messy. I've seen it get messy.
Yeah, and that's why we always do the reserve capacity. So the pumps are always set low, plus I need lift. I need a certain amount of head on the pumps to make them even function. But in general, I'm about a day's reserve capacity on each one of these tanks is what I'm shooting for. So, yeah.
Thank you.
okay, Joe, one more question. If you take the building and the parking area, do you have some idea of what the square footage of impervial surface is?
You know, I actually was calculating it the other day, and I had it in a drawing, but I did not print that with
All right.
me,
No problem.
so.
All right, the chair would entertain a motion if anybody would like to make one.
Are you looking for a vote?
Well, like I said, I have your input. I am going to the planning board. You know, I'm going to tell them what your concerns are. I'm going to be upfront and nothing to hide about it.
Would you like to go to them, talk to them about what we've said?
Yeah, I think-
And then maybe if they say, well, gee, go back, like, here, do this, do that, and then maybe come back, or
So I want to see where it goes with them on the waivers that I need next week before anything else. I'm more concerned about the waivers than I am kind of getting through the rest. Like, there's a lot that hinges upon getting that waiver for the road design.
because if you don't get it, you gotta come back to
I'm
us
back before you anyways,
so
you know, and
Maybe you should just, we should,
so.
I'd like to make a motion that we table the discussion at this point and await further feedback from the developer, if you will.
Second on that motion?
I'll second.
Or further?
looks like,
Discussion on the motion? I'm just a little concerned that our opinion doesn't get to planning board. And the benefit of doing a vote is that we'd write a letter. So I'm okay with the motion if someone were to write a letter to planning now saying, just summarize our discussion and let planning know. I don't know how you do that without a vote. You can't say how the
we
commission.
can't do that without a vote.
Yeah, and can I just make a point of information? I know you're in the middle of a motion here and everything, but, you know, I greatly appreciate if you could add to whatever if you do decide to send something to the board, that you would recommend accepting my waiver request to minimize the wetland impacts. Because, you know what it's like, I come in, I'm just the dumb developer, engineer guy saying, hey, I want to avoid wetland impacts. I think it's the best thing, to be honest with you, to shorten that tangent up, but again, like, it's just
I
me,
guess if it takes a letter, it takes a letter, but
so.
Well, we
then
can't do a
let's-
letter without a vote,
Well, what-
and if, from.
We have a motion. We have a
Paul, you make a
second.
motion?
Does anybody want to amend the motion?
yep, there you go, Paul.
I would suggest we take a vote such that we can send a letter and we can acknowledge what the client has done in the way of getting out of the buffer, out of the wetland. We can support the client's request for 50-foot before a turn, but we can say that assuming this is how we vote, we can say that what's keeping us from recommending the project is that there's 3/4 of an acre of WCD impact with no mitigation. Client could easily say, I'm going to mitigate 10-1, I'm going to give you 6.6 acres of that 10 acres of uplands that I'll never develop. And he keeps the other 4 acres if the thing changes. But doesn't have to keep all 10 acres. We could get some of it. And then we could at least save face and say, all right, we gave up some WCD here, but we've got 5 acres or 6 acres in the back that'll never get developed. So I'm afraid the word will not get to, and this is not criticism, Joe. You shouldn't have to go to planning and represent us, so it's not fair necessarily. I don't know, that's where I stand. I'd like to see a vote.
Okay. So what would you like to vote on?
I'd like to make a motion that we vote
Well,
in opposition.
We'd like to amend,
yeah. like
Okay, I'll
what-
amend Ken's recommendation to say that instead we actually take a vote this evening in opposition to the project because there's too much impervious on a 5-acre site and too much WCD impact.
I can
is
second
that
that.
acceptable?
Yeah, it's acceptable, yes.
Could we have a second?
Ken
second.
Ken just
Again,
seconded, I
okay.
think.
So it's motion amended, second,
Oh, my
second.
God, how do I write that? All right, Ken
Fast,
made the motion.
Check.
Paul
amended.
amended.
Dave seconded on both occasions.
Dave seconded it.
Okay? Any further discussion on the motion?
No, but can he say again what he said?
That we vote to oppose the project as presented because the 2/3 of an acre of WC disturbance along with the high percentage of impervious is overburdening this site and with no mitigation. And what the board would like to see is mitigation by protecting part or all of the back 10 acres of upland.
And we appreciate,
And we appreciate the fact that he's
Add
moved
that as a
the,
comment.
and we appreciate the fact he's moved the driveway so there's no wetland impact. And we support the 50, how do you want us to say this, Joe? Support the 50-foot driveway.
Oh, tangent.
Waiver.
It's a
Tangent.
tangent, a 50-foot tangent.
So we support the client's request for a waiver of the, for a 50-foot tangent on the driveway.
okay, and we support the water line, or I feel like we're
part of
getting
That's part of the
very.
project. I mean, I don't think you have to say we
Which is-
support the
yeah,
water
which-
line or we support the
It's kind of like a
60-foot.
separate
Okay.
thing, and rather, sorry.
Going once, going twice? You got enough notes?
I'm gonna have to go over this again.
We
but
got a video.
It's, yeah, exactly.
All right, please vote. All those in favor of the motion, vote aye. Anybody can abstain, anybody can
Aye.
oppose, but anyhow, please, all those in
Aye.
favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
No, I,
Mike's opposed?
no,
He was a late in favor.
Or, what, are you in favor?
Yes. Any abstaining? No. Everybody voted. No one opposed.
Okay,
Please write the letter.
all right, the letter. When are you going to planning?
Next.
Tomorrow.
No, a week from Monday. A week from next Monday. So you got like 10 days.
All right, I got 10 days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you,
Thank
Joe.
you. Already did. All right, the next item on the agenda is new business. It is map 7 and 8, lot 994, 995, 996-1, and 9135-3. Hayden Road, proposed 15-lot subdivision with 10,000 square feet of impact to the WCD for storm water treatment. Shane. There he is. Representative of Edward Herbert Associates.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. Please introduce yourself.
I will. For the record, my name is Shane Gendron. I'm employed with Herbert Associates. With me this evening is Dave Mendez. I just have a couple of handouts I'd like to hand out to the board.
Please.
Thank you.
you requested from Jim.
He didn't show up today.
I know.
Thank you, sir. 2. Oh, let's go over the slideshow.
Good, how's it going?
Thank you, sir.
I've been staying over there, so. before the meeting and then I forgot.
All right, so a little about this project. What we have before you this evening is, it's what we're calling is a 15-lot subdivision, but 3 of the lots are existing lots. So what we end up with is actually 13 new proposed house lots that we're proposing here on about 2,400, on about 1,400 linear feet of roadway off of Hayden Road for Mr. Mendez. So we're reconfiguring these lots and then putting them together, and it's what we call a conventional subdivision. So all the lots are about an acre. They all meet all your zoning requirements. We've been through planning board with this project, and through the review process with your town review engineer, originally we had absolutely no impact with this project. We were going to propose what they call a water quality unit for the drainage. So it's a tank that has a bunch of baffle filters in it. It basically spins out our suspended solids, treats our total nitrates and phosphates, and discharges the stormwater back to the low point where the wetland is. The issue that he had with that system was that it's maintenance hungry. So this is going to be a town road that the town would end up taking over. He asked us to look at some different options of what we could do with the stormwater and not be doing something that's going to be a burden to the town for maintenance. So we went back to the drawing board with the design, and what we came in with is the plan that I handed out to you folks this evening, which contemplates about 10,400 square feet of temporary, I call it temporary WCD impact, for construction of sediment forebay, a wet pond, and an outlet control structure at the lowest point in the subdivision. So the property is kind of existing farmland for the most part. It's, a piece of property that kind of sits between Hayden and Simpson Road. It was part of the Smith Farm originally. Some of it is fields. The area that we're talking about this evening in the WCD for the impact is field. It just happens to be the lowest area on the subdivision where all the drainage would drain to. And that's why it ends up being where it is. So again, I look at it as temporary impact to construct these ponds. Once the ponds are established, the road is established, everything is loamed and seeded. Obviously, all of our siltation control and BMPs are in place, prior to construction. I've included a set of photos for the board this evening. I went out earlier today, and we had the area of impact staked out in the field there for you, and we took some photos of it so you can see it. It's an existing field, so it's not virgin forest or anything like that. Up until about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, Mr. Mendez was haying this field. He just hasn't kept up with it. But it's, there's no big trees or anything like that. It's all scrubby brush and weeds and grass. That's really all about the application.
Okay.
We're just trying to do the best we can with what we got and not create a situation for the town that's going to be a costly maintenance burden.
What is the water source that's there that causes this to be the WCD?
So there's a seasonal ditch, kind of a seasonal stream that kind of runs down underneath Hayden Road. There's a culvert underneath Hayden Road right there. I was there today. It's bone dry. It's probably originally more of like a farm ditch or something, to drain the fields. But it does have a culvert pipe that goes under Hayden Road. It continues on. We subdivided the property across the street just as frontage lots along Hayden Road. That area of wet also has a WCD associated with it. So, it does require a WCD buffer, but, it's not a prime wetland or anything like that. At this point, it's bone dry.
Okay. And this is a temporary because it needs to be constructed?
Right.
It will be there forever though, right?
The structures and the ponds and the slopes that we'd be constructing would be there forever, but the impact itself, it's just to construct the pond, then we loam and seed and stabilize everything. After that, the town is supposed to maintain the bottoms of the swales and stuff. The side slopes are probably going to grow right back up.
And the outflow goes into the ditch?
Yes, it does. Yep. Okay. All the stormwater comes into a sediment forebay It's treated, so a lot of your suspended particles and phosphates and whatnot come out of your stormwater right there at that first phase. And then we go into what we call a wet pond. So that pond is a few feet deep, and it's actually going to hold water all the time. That's how it functions, to basically settle out any contaminants in the stormwater. From there, it goes into a level spreader, and then there's a flared end section that would drain back to the wetland. This has all been reviewed by your town engineer, and he's happy with this proposal.
It was suggested by him, wasn't it?
More or less, more or less.
Questions? Yes, Paul.
Shane, can you compare the system you initially came up with this one in terms of its function? Because we'd much rather have you not have to come in front of us with a system that doesn't impact the double. And I'm sure Mr. Mendez would rather not have paid for this twice.
Functionally, the systems would work very similar. The problem is that, you know, we've used the water quality separators a lot on private sites because there's capital there to be able to maintain that. The problem is the town of Pelham just doesn't have the resources to be able to maintain that on a regular basis. You know, if they get out to mow the swales once a year, you know, they're probably doing well. Mr. Keach's comment to us was, you know, town of Pelham has trouble sweeping the streets. They don't need to be maintaining this expensive water quality unit. The maintenance on the water quality unit would be probably 4 times a year you would do it, you know. And then basically it's got to be cleaned out like a catch basin. But then there's also long-term maintenance that would be, you know, as the baffles wear out on it, they have to be replaced. It's something that we've used in the past on a private site that it can work well where there's, you know, tenants that are paying in and there's, you know, some sort of capital that's going to be able to do it. As far as the quality of the stormwater, they're identical. You know what I mean? I have to have the same pre and post for the stormwater, so the two balance each other out. If anything, the proposal that we have tonight is probably a more robust system. You know, the other system is, you know, it's a low impact, you know, newer technology, but it's not something that the town was looking to take over.
Is there going to be a homeowners association?
No. No, this is going to be a town road.
And the idea that you need it is because of drainage from the town road.
Yes. Yeah, so, you know, anytime we do a subdivision, we've got to do something for drainage. In this case, we've got a curb street that has a bunch of catch basins in it. All that water is basically coming down. If you look at our road profile, it comes from the cul-de-sac all the way back down to Hayden Road. And that point right out there by Hayden Road is our lowest point. That's where all the water is going to drain to.
Ken?
Yeah, just an observation. When I first came on board with the Conservation Commission, one of my questions was, geez, we build a lot of these things, and they do need to be maintained, and everybody admits they need to be maintained. And we're going to go off and try to locate each and every one of these in the town so we had put together a maintenance program. We've yet to do that. So I don't see this as being a great alternative because, A, this still has to be maintained, and B, we still haven't got that project done yet in terms of where are these things that are existing today and what's the maintenance schedule. So I'm kind of like where Paul's coming from and saying, well, I understand what the engineer's saying, but I'm looking at it from a wetlands perspective and saying, well, you know, the other alternative seems more attractive to me. Because both of these require maintenance. One may require less, but it doesn't mean it's zero maintenance.
Yep.
And so if we're here to protect, you know, WCDs and wetlands and whatnot, I certainly go for the other alternative.
I believe they've identified a lot of those. That was Diener's
They're not done
job.
yet.
Oh, no.
They've got a long way to go.
And
there's no maintenance
There's
plan
100. Oh, no. Of those either.
Pardon me?
Of these either. Say nothing about the high-tech version.
Oh, exactly.
Right.
So I guess I'm more in favor of protecting a WCD at this point, maybe having to do some technical maintenance, if you will. I guess the question was asked about the homeowners association, which was a good one, and there doesn't appear to be one. So can that maintenance be put under some sort of a covenant with the buyers of this to know that when they buy this, they also sign up for the maintenance contract for that thing?
No, it's unlikely. The town's going to take ownership of the road. They're going to take ownership of the drainage.
No exceptions.
Not in a town road situation, if it was a private road or something like that, but that's not what Mr. Mendez would like to do. He'd like to build a town road. We only can do what we're asked, you know what I mean? You know, we had a proposal
try to
that was.
respond to it, yeah.
Right, and, I mean, you can recommend either, it doesn't really matter to me. I can tell you right now that they're gonna go with probably the wet pond.
Paul?
Shane, I missed the numbers at the beginning. How many acres are all these lots
Oh, it's
together,
about
the whole
30
site?
acres total.
30 acres?
Yep, about 30 acres.
And how many houses?
13 new proposed homes.
But there's 3 already there?
Yeah, we've reconfigured a few lots.
So, just for my own
There'll be a total of
feeling better
16?
about this, we're talking 10,000 square feet on 30 acres. We just heard of one where it was 27,000 square feet on 5
5.
acres. So this is a whole lot less
It's le-
disturbance
Less than a quarter of an acre for the
what
13
we were
lots.
talking about before. But before I give up too quickly,
Yeah, please, Paul.
Lot 12, 99412,
994.12.
it's the one right to the right of the.
Yep, I see it, yep.
That over, I don't see where it says the size of the lot. Is that,
Yeah, that's over an acre.
any chance that could be shrunk to an acre and move that driveway over and just pull the whole thing a bit out of the WCD? Come on, Shane, say yes. Make my night.
That's not 13, isn't it, Paul?
No, it's 12. 99412.
Actually, it's, I think, when you look at the subdivision, you look at the plan itself, that's going to impact 994.13 and the driveway on that lot.
Yeah, that's true. You'd have to move that driveway
Right.
a little bit, and then you could
Right.
pull the whole thing a little bit to the, I don't know what direction we're looking
The
at. now.
problem,
It is
the
north.
problem with that is that I can't change the low point. The low point is where it is, and that's where the stormwater has to discharge.
True.
I mean, this board is pretty familiar with how we design stormwater. We always go to the lowest point in the lot, so.
But wouldn't that
I-
pull some of the
I'm not going to
detention
be
pond
able,
out?
I'm not going to be able to reduce the impact very much at all with the design because I still have to drain to that low point. I've already got a waiver. If you look at the road itself, there's a pipe that comes across between these two basins right by Hayden Road and then runs down to that sediment forebay. I'm already asked for a waiver on the slope of that pipe. I'm not meeting the minimum slope requirement because, I mean, you folks know as a field is so flat. It's hard to move water on a flat surface. So, I mean, really, we're at bare minimum of what we can do. We need to keep that pond and everything at the lowest point we can absolutely drain to in order to get it to work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else on the board?
Just continuing on that same thing that Paul was talking about. So that house that's lot 13, where the driveway comes in off of Hayden,
Yep.
is that how it comes?
Yep.
What's going on with that driveway? Is that sheet flow toward the wetland, or is that curved, or is that,
No, that would just be sheet flow.
and how far is it from this basin that, or what's the little, what's the little gray area right next to Hayden Road? It's like an oval.
That's the sediment forebay.
Okay, so
So that's like where my pipe comes out from my basins and it goes into, you've seen it before.
Yeah, it
It's like a
goes
big
into
pit and it's
that.
got like larger rock in it usually.
Okay,
Yep.
and then it flows down into the pond, which is closer to lot 13?
Right, closer to the house where you see the number 166.
Okay, yeah.
That area there is where your wet pond exists.
That's
And
where
then
the
from
pond-
there, the water comes back out and then outlets back towards Hayden Road, right before it outlets and goes across the street. And that's my lowest
Is
point. right
that the little triangle?
That's right, yep.
The little, that's when it goes back into the wetland?
Right. So that water is moving quite a bit because that distance is about 200 feet. So I'm basically coming into that sediment forebay, I'm running down almost 180 feet, it goes into the wet pond, then it
pond.
goes back out another 180 feet, in order to make all that work and keep that water flowing.
Yeah, how are you doing that when you said that the slope is not really cooperating with you? The slope is almost flat.
Right, so it's all done by design, so we're cutting, that's why the pond is also a wet pond, because this area here has a higher water table.
Okay.
So, I can't dig a deep hole and not intercept the water table, so that's why we incorporated a wet pond in this design. But it's basically, you create the grade, right? So where your outlet is, you trench it down to your wet pond, then you trench it down to your outlet structure. I'm controlled by what that low point is, where the triangle is. That's my low point. I have to outlet
Okay,
there.
that's the lowest point right
Right.
there where that, where
Right,
that
I
triangle.
can't get it any lower than that. From there, it goes into a pipe and goes across Hayden Road.
And that little triangle is like a riprap
Yep,
kind
like a
of
flared end
deal?
riprap section, just, when, in a case where if you were having like heavy rains or something, that would slow your final velocity down in the
Okay,
waters.
so it doesn't like ditch
You're not
and all
getting
that.
scouring and that sort of thing. Typically, you're not gonna see any water running, it's gonna run below the stone, but in like a high, like volume
Right,
storm
it'll
or
just
something.
kinda like be
it's designed
seeping out
to
and
slow the
like-
water down, right?
Okay, and then is that the culvert that crosses Hayden right near there? It's like, it looks like
just-
one little line.
Yep, just down from where, you see where my hashed out area is,
Yep.
then there's the
Go
edge of
over like a
wetland.
half an inch or something
Yeah, and then
like
you
that.
see a pipe that goes across Hayden
Okay.
Road, yep.
And that's the channel or the semi-quasi
Yeah, that's,
channel?
well, I mean, that's the outlet to go across Hayden Road for the water.
Right. Is this a ditch, this?
More or
this-
less.
I
More or
mean, is it a visible ditch, or is it just,
When you get down into the field more, it is literally a ditch. It's straight as an arrow. Down here, it's a little bit wider, it's more of, I would call it like a seasonal stream. I looked at it today, there was no water in it. It's bone dry today. Same with across the street. There's no water going across Hayden Road right now.
okay.
Well, we'd all admit that we've been in a drought for a while, right?
Absolutely.
So if you found water, we'd
Just
have a
look-
real problem.
Look at my lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
All right? Everybody all set? Anyone from the public here to talk about this? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the board. Any further discussion? Okay, Chair would entertain a motion, so we can write a letter.
I'll make a motion to approve the project as presented. And just as an aside, I did a little math. This is less than 1% WCD impact of the site. The one we just saw was over 12% impact. So there's a huge difference between, I just don't want us to feel like we're playing favorites here and who we approve and who we don't. The huge difference between approving a 1% WCD impact and a 12% WCD impact. So I feel comfortable with a motion suggesting we approve the plan as presented.
Second motion.
Okay, at this time, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain?
I think I'm opposed.
Okay.
I don't like to say yes to things that we don't see. So I'm opposed.
Okay.
But you guys feel comfortable with it, so that's fine. So it's
Well, it's
6-1-0.
6-1.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right. Don't get violent. With all the rest of this,
Okay.
okay? I appreciate all the public interest. Does somebody want to speak? Going once, going twice?
Good evening.
Yes, sir. Please identify yourself and your address.
Nathan Boutwell, 107 Bridge Street, Pelham, New
Thank you.
Hampshire. I'm also an owner at 62 Footpath Way on Gumpus Pond. Thank you for the forum tonight, allowing myself and some other residents to be here to express our concerns about the potential of a off-road, off-highway, or ATV trail or off-highway road, whatever, OHRV, off-highway recreational vehicle.
Okay.
Not sure how this all came about.
Warrant article.
Warrant article. Okay, that warrant article, I believe, was to put together a committee. So it hasn't been correct me if I'm wrong, a warrant article to approve that particular site for the OHRV park. So with that said, learning about the OHRV committee that was put together and the talk of that site gave me great concern. Again, a property at 62 Walking Path, which is almost a direct abutter to the proposed OHRV site. One of the concerns that I have is the quiet enjoyment of the property. We bought the property a couple of years back. The Gumpus Pond area is an absolutely beautiful, pristine property. I give great thanks to this board for purchasing much of the land in that area, which gives us the great protection and the beauty, the serenity, and the quiet enjoyment, again, like I say, to have on that property. And the property was purchased bought with public funds with the purpose and intent of conservation, not the purpose and intent to, in my opinion, to have it being taken over by a private club for off-road vehicle use. I feel backed into a corner with this, and I hate to have to come out and fight, but I have to come out and fight. That's just the way it is. The way I look at it, to solicit public funds or to utilize public funds to buy conservation with the sole purpose and intent for conservation use to me, it's a violation of public trust for anybody on this board to recommend utilizing that site. I hate using those words, but that's the way I feel.
Please.
Yeah. With that, utilizing the public funds, the future current use owners of other properties, if they see this move forward with an OHRV park, I think they'll think twice. I think they'll think twice about signing on to conservation land without some sort of crazy restrictions down the road, and then having them feel as if they did the wrong thing. And that's what I'm hearing from the owner who sold the property to the Conservation Committee, or the town, I should say. He feels that maybe he should have done a conservation easement, but in a way he feels somewhat not good about the whole situation where it's going and where it seems to be going without any pushback. Hopefully with some pushback, this board will have some common sense and good judgment to not utilize this pristine property for that type of use. As an example, in Berlin, New Hampshire, the state allowed, or the town allowed, either the state or the town allowed OHRV use on the roads, and now there's an inverse condemnation lawsuit going on up there because the quiet enjoyment of the property is now being intruded on. Some of the things that come to mind with using an OHRV park is to have a property that fits the use, more something along the lines of an industrial use property or in close proximity to an industrial use property where there's a lot of noise. Noise isn't an issue. But to have an OHRV property on a pristine piece of land like this, high on a hill where the sound can travel, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And reading the description of the land, it references steep slopes to Gumpus Pond, which is concerning from an erosion issue. The vetting process for it all, I'm kind of baffled a little bit about, because the OHRV committee vetted the land. That's like the hen watching the chicken coop. The fox watching the chicken coop. It kind of, that's the way I see it. I did not engage in in the whole conversation of it. Could be, we weren't, the abutters weren't notified of it, which would have been nice to have been notified and been able to at least speak our piece in that point. It's also, it's being considered for a permanent use. This isn't going to be a one-time thing or a trail that goes, in and through and off into the great wilderness, if you will. It's a permanent use for a circle-type track. And, I having off-road vehicles when I was a kid in my backyard, you'd go around the yard enough. You'd want to see if you could go around it faster and faster and faster. And then it becomes a racetrack. And that's just the way it works when people, they get competitive with their OHRVs. And I have a great passion for that stuff. I used to race cars. And I had a great passion for going round and round in circles, believe me, and racing and having a good time with this stuff. So I understand where they're coming from with this. And I hope they can appreciate and understand where we come from as landowners and property owners to try and protect the quiet enjoyment of our properties. So I think that looking at different properties in town and possibly entering into a lease contract. One property that I thought about without doing any due diligence is the Demoulas property across the street from R&B on Route 38. That property, there's trails that go through that area. I think that'd be a great spot for an OHRV park. Maybe they could enter in some sort of a lease program, a lease deal with the Demoulas or whoever owns that property. It appears that there is some trails there now. At least parallel Route 38. I haven't walked the property, but that would be a pretty decent spot where it's in close proximity to loud road noise, it's in close proximity to industrial park, the prevailing winds are out of the northwest, so it will carry sound to the south, which is more and more commercial in nature. Any of the dust and dirt and things like that won't affect other properties or homes within the close proximity of it. So I think that's the approach that I would look at when it comes to having an OHRV park. And one of the other things that comes to mind is if I wanted to build an OHRV park on my residential piece of land, I'm sure Paul would probably, he wouldn't be too happy with me. So it's creating a non-conforming use. It's creating a non-conforming use on this property. The property that was solely and intended for conservation use to begin with, and the people bought into that. They bought into the conservation of this land and the pristine quality of this land. And I just don't want the town to feel as if they bought into a false bill of goods. And I hope that common sense and good judgment can prevail and say no to this. Say no moving forward to this. This doesn't make sense. And I'd like to just read a couple of paragraphs from the public hearing dated January 13th, 21, Tower Hill Road. The Tower Hill Road, gravel roads access, the tower located at the top of the hill on a 100 by 100 foot area. The land is beautiful with a large hill roughly centered on the property. The land slopes down to the north to Gumpus Pond and to the south on Tower Hill. Let's see here, where else did I want to go?
Sorry, take your time.
Yep. Just quoting Mr. Gagnon. Mr. Gagnon has been in talks with the landowners for 13 years. Mr. Gagnon filled out selection criteria and checklists for open space in 2007. Quote, the land is in excellent condition. The purchase would protect water resources, rural character, and wildlife habitat. The land can be used for educational purposes and forest management.
That's the minutes from the selectmen's
Correct.
meeting?
Yeah. That's what the town bought into. The town didn't buy into basically take the land and shift it over to an independent group of individuals to have an off-road park. And part of it also, Ms. McKay commented that open space land provides connectivity even if the town does not own it, in discussions with the open space part of the property. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be discussed, I think, or thought about prior, in my opinion, prior to this board approving a site like that. I hope that they can see the common sense in saying no to this. Again, in some of the talks with people in this town, they're kind of the same opinion that, geez, you know what? I've got some land in current use. Maybe I'll think twice. Maybe I'll think twice before I sell it to conservation. So I hope that what little bit I said kind of weighs with you, and you make, in my opinion, would be the right choice and say no to an OHRV park on this site.
Sure.
Thank you.
Hang on just one second, please. Are you representing yourself or a group?
I'm representing myself. I'm a landowner on Compass Pond, 62 walking pathway.
Yep,
Yeah.
I've got that. Okay. Very good. One question. We were considering having an open hearing next month because we knew tonight would run quite a while.
Yep.
Are you recommending that we continue to have that?
Absolutely.
Are there
Absolutely.
other people interested in speaking as well?
Absolutely. I think absolutely the more people that hear about this, that I think it will do well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think there's some other people that may want to speak as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'll be happy to share a few minutes. Is it basically the same, or do you have other information to add?
Yes.
Oh, good. Name and address, please.
John Walter. I'm at 48. It's called, well, it's a pathway, so it's 48 Pathway, Compass Pond. And I
Okay.
also own a part of the Compass Hill pasture just north of this proposed park.
Okay.
So I have a map here that kind of delineates some of the area that we're talking about in the OHRV park. I have a letter, I'm going to read
Let them know, Karen.
a portion of that.
Yes, thank you.
Other portions I'm going to let you read, so I'll pass out a copy.
Yeah,
Try to make it to the point.
just move it down a little bit. Can you see? Yep,
It goes where that black,
There you
little
go.
black spot is on the table.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. So just, and I have a copy
Mr.
of these
Walter,
maps.
I
This
just-
is
Walter, one
If you
second.
don't mind, can I just say something before you get
Sure.
started? My apologies. I just wanted to go back over the history of how this happens. I suspect most people in the audience know this, but in case they don't, this committee, this board had nothing to do with initiating this effort. What happened was about this time last year, a citizen submitted a citizen's petition warrant article to allow ATVs on all town land. That was basically how it was written. Allow ATVs on all town land. Well, needless to say, that caused concern among numerous folks, because what if that had passed? So Chairman Haverty of the Select Board at the deliberative session modified the language to say, would the voters approve of a committee to study the possibility? That warrant article passed, hence the committee has been formed. So just so people know, this isn't something that conservation spawned or has even weighed in on yet. So speaking for myself, I'm delighted to get this feedback. And I appreciate everybody taking the time and sitting for 2 hours waiting to get your chance at the mic. But I just wanted people to know that this came from a citizen who put a citizen's petition in that got modified to a committee, and the committee hasn't completed their work. I'm not on the committee. All we've heard from the committee is what you probably saw at our meeting last month.
Yes.
So with that said, just wanted to say how we got here. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time and talking
Yes.
to us.
Yes, thank you, sir. So I'll draw your attention to the map, first of all. This is Compass Pond here, so this is north of the cell tower that's here. So I own property that's adjacent to this cell tower by only less than 100 feet. We purchased property that was up for conservation property a few years ago. It's a cooperative with Don Foss, Alan Smiglowski, and myself, John Walter. Don Foss owns this adjoining piece here down to the brook below the dam. The property here on this peninsula down at the end of the town conservation land, Keith and Kathy Regan, Michelle and Robert Richards own this piece that's adjacent to this proposed property here on the hill that goes down to Gumpus Pond. And Mr. Riccio owns this property here adjacent to the proposed cell tower area where the trails would be. So we had a meeting of those people and a few other people that showed up at an impromptu meeting, and this is the result of that after hearing the video that this committee listened to, watching a video of the last meeting with the proposal of the OHRV committee. So I'll read a portion of this.
Have you emailed that letter to any of the board?
I have it.
Okay. Thank you. Please go ahead.
I did offer a copy of this to the selectmen. We've met with the selectmen already on this proposal, and they're in the same position, pretty much still yet to make decisions on all of this, and I appreciate all that. So
Okay.
just read my piece. We expect to be back here for the November 9th with other people's input at that time. So it's just me. I'm addressing issues or concerns raised by some Gumpus Pond citizens relative to the proposed OHRV to be placed on a town conservation property, Gumpus Hill near Tower Hill property. I'm representing some Gumpus Pond residents relative to maintaining the quality and the well-being of Gumpus Pond, to the water quality and maintenance of the surrounding shoreline. Also representing some of the property owners that I identified here, have adjacent property newly acquired to the newly acquired Tower Hill area now owned by the town of Pelham, and the purchase agreement with the former owner, Charles Zokas. Other owners include, as I mentioned, Wendy and Alan Smilowski, John and Kathleen Walter, that's myself, Donald and Eleanor Foss, family, Keith and Kathy Regan, and Robert and Michelle Richards. I was first made aware of this proposal at the OHRV by Gumpus Pond residents who watched discussions of the Pelham Conservation Commission on September 14th meeting regarding the OHRV Trail Park to be located on the Gumpus Hill area now owned by the town of Pelham. I'm surprised to learn of such a proposal to be considered on the town of Pelham conservation land. I thought that the Conservation Commission were appointed stewards of the Pelham Conservation, that is to protect the environment, provide sound management of town property, to educate and encourage the public to make wise use of the land, further to protect the natural environment, natural resources, and the watershed. I've outlined 16 or so different items that I'll give it to you to read at your time, but some of them have been mentioned by a former speaker. So I also spoke to Mr. Charles Zokas by telephone relative to the proposed OHRV on the property. He said he sold it to the town, is now being considered an OHRV park. He did not have any knowledge of that the town was considering such a use for the land. He commented that he probably never would have sold the land if he had known it would be used for such a purpose. He still owns the cell tower road that has access to the tower and is concerned about damage that could be caused by the OHRV going across the road and up and down that trail. There's no fences around it. Some OHRV riders have already moved stones or cut logs to now go around the gate that it's at the bottom of the Tower Road, to much to his consternation, and they ride up over stone walls that are near another gate that he has further up on Tower Road. whatever obstructions they put up there, they find a way to get around it. Mrs. Zokas commented, we thought we were doing the right thing by involving it with conservation. He did have open trails at one time for snowmobiles, but did not approve of the OHR riding trails on his property, tried to keep them off. This proposal acceptance could create a negative relationship toward the Conservation Commission by townspeople who are considering offering their land for conservation in the future, which Nate spoke on. This spring, I had to remove a four-wheeler that an unknown rider left in the Gumpus Pond after going through the ice past winter. I also assisted a motorbike rider with a disabled bike this spring who had ridden his motorbike up from Dracut to ride on the trails and then came down over our property into Gumpus Pond pathway that goes along the path. So people are coming in from lots of other areas, not just the town, to ride on these trails currently. So it exists as a problem as we see them. So the RSA 36A, it all deals with conservation. Everything that's on that whole paper is all about protecting the natural resources and the watershed resources. So we're trying to protect Gumpus Pond conservation area. We're obligated by our statutes there for our organization down there to protect the quality of water. So it concerns us, so it kind of contradicts our efforts in that regard. But after our brief meeting, we asked people to sign on to a petition to those people that are opposed on that. And right now we've got 30 signatures for people that oppose having an RV trail in that location. So I'll just pass out my paper and you can read.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Anyone else from the... Flip a coin.
We don't often get this attendance in public.
Great to have conservation appreciated.
Right.
Hi,
Your name and address, please?
my name is Beth Jusome, and I'm over on Hines Lane in Pelham.
Thank you very much.
And I'll keep it super, super quick. I just had a couple of
Thank you.
questions. I know that we'll be speaking on the 9th. I just had a couple questions.
Yes.
It's, as everyone has said, it's a beautiful area. And you're a conservation committee, which in town has always supported conservation.
I'm good.
And one of my big
Yeah, I already have
questions.
Go ahead.
Hold on one second,
Yeah, I'm waiting.
just so that we can hear you.
Yeah, he sent me an email with it. Today?
Thank you. Did you send?
Well, that's
this
being
elec-
passed out. Can we have that incorporated in the
send this
minutes of the meeting?
electronically?
What's being handed out?
You could do that too.
Did anybody get my letter?
Attach it to
Right
the
here,
email.
you sent it to me.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I sent it to everyone on the Conservation Committee. Did everybody get it? Good.
I know where you're coming from.
Thank you.
So I just
ahead,
had two
please.
questions.
Yes.
The first is, it's a beautiful piece of land, and I'm wondering if the Conservation Committee could walk it, just to see for yourselves the extensive trails and the location, the feasibility of that property, and how close it is to private property and the development. It's 25 feet from Rolling Ridge Lane, some of the proposed trails, very close to Rolling Ridge. There's extensive trails that abut their proposed trails that go right down to the pond. And Tower Hill Road has a gate, but I walked it last week and there were quad marks going around the gate, so you could easily connect that area with trails to get to Gumpus Conservation. So for me, putting an ATV park next to Gumpus Conservation, which abuts other conservation areas, is a big concern, because I'm on the trails walking a lot, and I do see the damage. So that was I wanted to know if you'd walk it. And the other question I have is, I know that the town voted on this, and the Board of Selectmen put together a committee. So who makes the decisions? Like, what is the process for this to possibly go forward on a warrant or not? Is it the Board of Selectmen?
As it stands, the committee reports to the selectmen. There would have to be another warrant article, I believe. And Mike, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, it would go on the ballot, and you'd have to have 2/3 of the town vote yea or nay for it.
So before it goes to the ballot, that's where I'd like clarification, so.
There's actually nothing being proposed right now. When we came in front of Conservation, it was really just to get input.
Yeah.
Like, the Gumpus Hill area is not anything that's being proposed. There's really, nothing being proposed right now. I get all the response, but there really is no proposal being put in front of anybody just yet. So we're just exploratory, that's it.
To see if it's feasible,
See if it's feasible, yeah.
right?
The idea was.
So there
to
really
walk-
is nothing, yeah.
The idea was to work on the article that was voted on. The article that was voted on, as Paul pointed out, was one that started out as opening up all town property to ATVs or OHRVs. Subsequent to that, during the following meetings, the article itself was transformed, and they invented the idea of having a committee. The requirement was to have a report back to the selectmen in a year. However, nothing that I know of has been official yet. The whole process is an exploration. There are 5 people that are quite committed to doing what the selectmen have asked them to do. One is from conservation, one is from forestry, and there are
Board of
3.
Selectmen.
One is a selectman, and there are 2 citizens.
Actually, 3 citizens.
3 citizens.
So that's super helpful, because I wasn't sure if the OHRV actually put forth a proposal, and then once a proposal is made, who does it submit to? I'm guessing the Board of Selectmen.
Maybe this will help a little bit. So if you go to the Pelham website, there is an OHRV advisory board
Yep.
breakdown. You can go there. All of our meetings are posted public when we have them. Anybody can go to them. They're not private. So you guys are welcome to go,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
we have them.
seen that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify. I didn't know what the status was. If you looked at that meeting, it looked like a lot of energy went into forming a club or looking at forming a club, and they mentioned bylaws. So it almost looked like it was a proposal. And my question was,
Okay.
who,
No,
who,
Go ahead.
who makes the decisions for it to go forward?
it is up to the selectmen. Right now, there has been a huge amount of energy put into it because of the selectmen's request and
per the
the past
taxpayer.
warrant article by the citizens of the town. And so the committee themselves have taken a hellacious burden on to try to see if there was some way to satisfy this so that in the future, we wouldn't have another warrant article opening up randomly, uncontrolled, all town property. So if there was some way to develop a solution that was acceptable to the majority of the citizens in Pelham, and not any specific group like conservation or anything else, it would still have to be passed by another warrant article, I believe.
Okay, yeah, that helps. I just,
Good, I can see how you could get confused, because the last meeting that we had on the topic, there was a series of, I'll call it a status update as to what was being discussed, not what was concluded, but some of the areas that were discussed, and that piece of property that you mentioned was an area that was in discussion, but not in any kind of a conclusion. So
okay.
that could lead to that level of confusion, but again, we do have a representative on that group. Mike is that representative. So, he's been fortunately bringing back to our committee what the status is. If you look at the minutes on that website, I too was directed to go look at the minutes. I too was disappointed when I looked at the age and the lack of clarity in those minutes.
They're sparse.
So I can understand where you're
I don't
coming
do
from.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right.
One of the things you
A
may.
lot of the boards are behind on their minutes.
That's why I'm
yeah.
here to question. I'm just
Sure.
trying to learn
No,
and
that's perfect.
understand the process more.
That's perfect.
So out of curiosity, so it looks like this is an investigative,
Yeah, this will not come in front of a vote to conservation and they say yay or nay. They may, at one point, if we come up with a solid proposal, we may come in front of conservation and say, hey, we would appreciate your support. And on the ballot where it says, Board of Selectmen support this and conservation supports it, or, I'm just saying that at some point may be a possibility. But as we're going down, the idea of maybe or maybe not having an idea, like, we're really just exploring the option and the idea of it.
I think the wording is feasibility. So
Yeah,
is it
feasibility.
feasible
Yeah,
for this to happen
Yeah.
in town? There was a thought to put it on Tower Hill, which,
it might.
One of the things I
Might
might
not.
suggest is that if you could take Mr. Botwell's approach, and if there are any other places in Pelham that you know
Yeah.
that you could recommend that would even fit better than your backyard.
I've walked all the trails in Pelham. I was out today. I'm constantly on the trails. And I can't say that my mindset is, where should an OHRV park be? So I will leave that up to the OHRV
Yep.
board or committee.
Hi.
Raising your hand, Christine?
Yes, I would like to say something. I just wanted to let you know that that's one of my favorite places, trail systems. I love them all, but that has such variety of, vernal pools, precious wetlands with beaver lodges. It's extremely beautiful. And I really appreciate you and the others supporting and advocating for preserving it.
We're just here to, let's slow things down and talk and learn from other people what they're looking for. I understand. I've heard others say that they've ridden for a long time and they want to continue that.
Well, it's happening now. If you said there's people driving around the gate, and he's mentioned that he pulled one out of the water. So it's just, it's happening regardless of what we decide or not. I'm just saying that, to try to minimize it and put it in one area was kind of maybe the thought process of it.
Controlling
Not saying
that,
it's
yeah.
my decision or not,
Yeah.
but that was kind of the thought was like, hey, if we have people driving all over town, which was what the original warrant article was, and they said, hey, let's rewrite it to try to put it all in one area and maybe it stops in the rest of the town. And, who knows? There's nothing on the books yet.
I would say that, we're going to look into everything and coming up with the best solution that's going to help everybody.
I'm
in the
hoping you'll
town.
do a site walk, just to see the ferns, to see the backside, how steep it is. It is very steep. If you look at the maps.
You certainly assisted me because that was one of the items on my list.
Yeah, I'd love to see, and if you want to make it public, I'd definitely enjoy going.
All site
It would
walks are
have to
public.
be public.
Yeah, they all
All right,
do.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Could I just say a minute?
Sure.
Okay, so there's been comment that the minutes aren't the greatest. Minutes are just a general repeat of what happened at the meeting. They're not a verbatim thing, so I haven't seen the minutes for this club or whatever, but if they said, hey, we discussed this, that's adequate to say. They don't have to give a bunch of detail about, well, so-and-so said this, and then the other person said this, and he responded this, and it doesn't have to be
I would agree with you, but
that
I'd
detailed.
suggest that you should read the minutes, and then you'll be more educated as to comment as to whether they're sufficient or not
Well,
sufficient.
she said they were not sufficient.
Right, and
So
I would have a tendency to agree with her.
Okay. They don't have to be
They're not.
he this, she that, whatever.
Right,
It's
not to that
very
extent,
general.
but the timing is off as well. So.
Okay, anyone else from the public?
My name's Michelle Richards. I live at 61 Hines Lane. I am an abutter to the conservation land, and I've been there 25 years and absolutely love it. It's peaceful. The whole area is great. And when I learned that the Conservation Commission bought that land, we were really happy because we figured the trails, everything, it's going to stay the way it is. So I'm glad to hear that it's not a proposal yet, but I did understand that there was a OHRV proposal on the land. And I just think the impact it'll have, the noise level, the wildlife, for so many reasons, I'm really very concerned about it. So I'm glad to be able to come and just express that.
Thank you very much.
Has the conversation tonight helped you to understand better what's happening currently?
Very much so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Bringing it back to the board. Let's go for, anybody have a walk-in? Dave, we'll go from right to left. Anything you want to bring up before we have an adjournment?
You don't have to.
I'll go to the
You just
left.
say no.
No, I'll start with this. You know, I agree that, you know, we take a look at this thing with Compass Pond, okay? You know, as a board, I think we really got to look at, and again, listening to everybody tonight, and then, you know, myself thinking about it, we really have to do the listening and work to come up with something that is going to benefit everybody rather than just, I have ATVs, okay? I ride, okay? But, you know, we want to make sure that whatever we do as a board, it's the right thing. Because we don't want it to come back down the road and, you know, bite us. You know, because we did something. I know with Paul, you know, he and I have had conversations about, you know, the different lands that we purchase and so forth. And I think that's a very, very important thing in the town. And I don't want to see something get jeopardized or all of a sudden the public doesn't trust us anymore. You know, we got to be very careful with that.
Paul?
No comment.
Mike?
All set.
Oh, me?
Well, I'm just waiting for you to finish writing.
No, that's okay.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm
Any
okay.
comment? You all set? We'll walk in?
Well, there's an opening of the Miriam Farm.
On
Is
Sunday.
that it? Is that this
Open
weekend?
house?
Like an open house? So I just wanted to mention that. Do you know a little bit about
1 to
this?
3 on Sunday, and it's advertised on the town website.
Oh, good.
People should park at Pelham Veterans Memorial Park, because the
There's no
Merriam
parking,
Farm parking
yeah.
here is tiny. It's going to be, I think, pretty full. So park at Pelham Veterans. There's supposed to be a police officer there to help with crossing Mammoth Road, and then come on over. I believe there'll be apples and cider and, I don't know, apple donuts or
Take a
something.
hike.
There'll be something
Right.
good. And then there'll be a few speeches, including Fred Merriam, who's the son of the, he's the grandson of the person who actually owned the property. So it'll be interesting to hear from him. He's also a historian. He's on the historical committee in Chelmsford, so he can tell us a lot about the history of the property. And then there'll be site walks.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, I've got a walk-in item. I took an action item several months ago to speak with the police in Pelham in regards to an incident that took place up in Concord on their walking trails where 2 people were murdered. So I took an action item to see, in fact, what the Pelham police were doing in terms of just getting out there onto the trails and having a presence, if you will. And so I got a letter back, it was very surprised me, it was very positive, where they came back and they said, yes, they will increase patrols on random patrols on the conservation trails, conservation areas, number one. And number two, they suggested that maybe we put up some sort of signage to indicate the fact that they were, in fact, out there and walking those trails, participating in those trails. So my question is number one, has the Forestry Commission done anything to put up signage or anything to indicate that that has taken place, as recommended by the police department?
We've put up plenty of signage, but I don't think there's any signage that says that the police are monitoring these trails. There's a sign that says if you see an incident, report it to the police. The police's phone number is on the sign. It's the sign that lists the do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
And then says report any incidences to the police. But no, not to your specific point, Ken. There isn't a sign that says the police monitor this trail randomly. I don't know how the sign should read, but there isn't any.
Okay. Do you think that was something you could bring to the Forestry Commission to
I
do that?
can. You might want to ask the police how they want it worded.
They really didn't, the letter's I had the letter committed.
You've sent it.
Yeah, the letter is part of our minutes, so they didn't make a recommendation as to the wording, just the concept of making the public aware of the fact, the users of those trails, that the police department is in fact, out there and monitoring the trail. And the other thing was if we could possibly ask the police department to give us an update on the number of times those trails have been monitored since that action took place. They agreed to start monitoring those trails. I'm just concerned. I don't want to have us in a situation where we have all this great land.
Walk up here.
People are out there walking around.
Try the mic.
People are out there walking around on this land and not feeling comfortable. Matter of fact, given what happened up in the Concord area, I think it's only reasonable due diligence that we have some sort of an activity taking place, even randomly.
Okay.
So if we could ask the police department from the Conservation Commission, if you will, as to what level of activity. I'm sure they keep logs and whatnot as to what the officers are doing.
Okay, thank you.
That would be it.
Christine?
I just want to say that a few weeks ago, I did take a walk at the Merriam Conservation. What a beautiful acquisition. For those who will be watching this tonight or in the future, just to let people know, it's an easy hike. It's a level, I would say it's a level hiking trail, very easy. I don't think there's any uphill or downhill. It's pretty level. And beautiful open field. Nice walk to the Beaver Brook with the bench. The only thing I caution for people turning in, either to the left or to the right, whether you're parking at Veterans or in that little parking lot, I almost got rear-ended, and what happened was people who pull off Sherburne, when they're pulling on to, Mammoth Road.
128.
When they're pulling on to Mammoth Road, they tend to pick up speed. And what happens is if they're not paying attention to the person who's waiting for oncoming traffic to pass, to take the left into that parking area, wherever direction you're coming from, signal in advance. That's all I can say, and hope I just want to let you know that it is a little short there from that Sherburne, that parking lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Yes,
Just
sir.
if I can add to that, the roundabout's going to help with a lot of that, because the
Perfect.
roundabout will, I
Perfect.
can't say when it's going to be there, but
Okay.
there will be a roundabout there someday, and the traffic calming, you know how slowly people
Right.
now approach and leave roundabouts. I mean, relatively speaking, most people do. So I think that problem is going to be lessened significantly.
Good.
Karen?
No.
All set. Okay. All right, wait a minute. My turn.
No, I'm not going to say nothing. No, I'm not saying
Okay.
anything.
All right, there's been a suggestion that we start this at 6:30 so we don't get out at 10 o'clock. Is anybody opposed to doing 6:30 like the other boards within the town start their meetings at 6:30?
I'm opposed to 6:30.
Because she doesn't get
Whatever.
home.
Well, I don't get home. Tonight I had to rush to get here, so.
Okay,
But-
anyhow, please keep it in the back of your mind. The other thing, I put up the email address, the logo that's up here prior to the meeting starting. I put the address, so if anybody wants to access all of us at the same time, the email address is there. We'll have it put in the minutes as well. Okay, The two things that I would like to talk about for 1.5 minutes is that I'd like to get a supporting vote or nod, because there are two expense items that I would like to pursue in the near future. One is a expanded wetlands study of the balance of Pelham, which would be about $2,700. The other one is to start the conservation plan, which is the follow-up to the natural resources inventory that we completed last year, and would be expanding on the open space plan that we already have from 2009. Cost of that would be about $3,800. The budget for the coming year, both of these items are included in that, and so far it's been approved. We'll have to wait until March, but I'd like to get a consensus from the committee that those are the two things that we should expend money on in the coming year. And I would ask for a vote of confirmation, or is anybody opposed to it?
So what's the first one for 2,700?
Expanded wetland study, Pelham. Gentleman involved would be Mark West.
And that would be to do...
Look at the rest of Pelham to see if there are other wetland areas that we should protect that could either be prime wetlands or with changes in our WCD ordinance in the near future, hopefully, that's the only way we can get protection for that space.
Okay.
Paul and I have talked a little bit. The recommendation would be that we would try to do conservation, the WCD ordinance review, and take the state approach, if possible, for mediation. If they involve themselves in 10,000 square feet, it should be a 10-to-1 ratio, as Paul was talking about tonight, that would be the same as what the state does. This is how we just expanded the open space with a conservation easement up there on Gumpus Pond of almost 20 acres because of the conservation subdivision on Courier Road, where they involved and used about 1 acre of the buffer on prime wetlands. This is no longer the case. What they use with wetlands now with the state is there are no buffers. However, if they become incurred on, you will have a 10-to-1 mediation situation. And that's the reason for the wetlands.
Is that in the WCD? You mean in the WCD ordinance? You'd like something similar to that?
Correct. And the other one is the conservation plan, which is taking the natural resource inventory and expanding and developing an implementation plan on how we would protect those in the future.
Okay, so you think that when you hire Mark West for this expanded wetland study thing, he's going to look at wetlands and help us with the WCD rewrite?
Nope.
Or, no?
Paul
You're
is
just
working
opening
on
that.
the WCD rewrite with planning
Okay, yeah, all right.
to get
I make a
an
motion to
assessment.
support it.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nobody is staying?
7-0.
7-0-0. All right, going once, twice?
Oh, I'd like to add one other.
Oh, my. Yes, sir.
Oh, we got a minute
It
too.
may-
Yep.
Just want to say that I did go to the
Almost got them.
board last selectmen's meeting, and I did get approved to be on an alternate on the ZBA. So,
Oh, nice.
Why that is important is because it would give us early warning system for those things going to look for waivers because they do not comply with town ordinance and planning and land use. And it would give us a really good working relationship so that some of these things that don't necessarily conform well, as has been explained tonight, could be averted, and it would prevent the yo-yo system, we hope, that we could express our concerns as early as possible in a situation that shouldn't have to come to us more than once. This one tonight has been here 2 or 3 times. Thank you. I appreciate your extended effort. Okay, I'm gonna.
Okay.
That's what I was counting down
All
to.
right, I just don't
All
want to.
right, if everybody's all set, does anybody have anything to add to the meetings that Karen has sent out for our approval? Changes, omissions?
Christine sent me something. I meant to ask Joe about that, about the regulations and stuff.
If you want to see it, yeah, I'll give it to you.
Yeah,
I'll give it to you, you can take a look. Here's some more.
I think you sent it to me electronically.
Oh, my notes are on it, but that's okay. Well, can I give you
No, I
that?
think you sent it to me electronically.
Yeah. Which one? Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look at the minutes themselves, because that's what I have to record.
This is the state, and am I correct in saying that the state, you can't be less lenient than the state? You can be
Correct.
more stringent, but you can't be less.
Correct.
Right.
Here's what the state says. Very poorly drained soil shall not be counted toward loading to obtain
Right, so
subdivision
I'll have to
approval.
look and see, I'll go back and relook at because I have to put what is said at the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
And we
I
have a
can't-
video of the meeting.
Even if somebody says the wrong thing, I have to say this was what said at the meeting.
Correct.
So
I
I'll
must
go back
admit,
and look at that.
Your notes, meeting notes are very well done,
Thank you.
very informative. One can read it and almost like you're there.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Okay.
so can we vote on it, and I'll look into this, Christine,
I make a
Yes,
motion to
as
approve the
amended.
minutes.
fix it if necessary.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I make
No,
a
no,
motion
no,
to adjourn
sidewalk,
meeting.
sidewalk minutes.
What?
Sidewalk minutes also have to be, that's 9/24/22.
Make a
Si-
motion to
sidewalk
approve the
minutes.
sidewalk minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Mike abstains
Mike
because he wasn't
abstained.
there.
Yeah, I wasn't here either.
Dave abstains because he wasn't there.
I wasn't there, so I abstain if I'm still included.
Okay, yep.
I was there.
So that's 3.
Okay, okay. All right,
Right.
that's fine, that's fine.
Anything else?
No, you can ask for adjournment.
We've done it. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
I think it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Who
Public.
seconded and firsted the
Mike.
adjournment? Mike and Paul.
If ever unsure, just pick me up.
I'll never contradict.